I'm not far enough along. Why am I not further along? Enough-isms and Whys are common cognitive distortions that accompany stress. But, as we know, the way we speak to ourselves impacts the way our body responds to stressors. Welcome to Normalize the Conversation. I'm your host, Francesca Regeter, and today I'm joined by licensed psychologist, consultant, and coach, Dr. Karen Dahl. In this episode, we delve into the intricacies of stress management, exploring the difference between healthy stressors that motivate us and distressors that hold us back. We provide actionable steps to combat stress, offering practical strategies to reframe distorted thinking and cultivate your resilience. Karen, thank you so much for joining me today. I am super excited for our conversation, but before we begin, I just want to check in. How are you really?
Thank you, Fran. Thank you for inviting me. How am I really? I feel energized and better than earlier in the week. How's that?
I love that. I feel the same way. I just made it through final exams, so I finally have some energy and I'm excited to be awake. Before it was a little touch and go on wanting to be up and doing things.
Yes, yes. And I find the weather, we're just talking about the weather. I find the weather makes a difference, and it's been rainy and gloomy and cold where I am all week. And so I'm hoping the sun comes out to help elevate the mood.
Oh, sending you some sunshine from here in LA. It
Thank
really
you.
does make such a difference. I went for a walk on the beach the other day. I was feeling really, it's perfect timing for this conversation. I was feeling really stressed and overwhelmed. I have so many different roles and responsibilities. I'm a caretaker, I do the nonprofit and a podcast, and I go to school and I travel. And I just hit that point of burnout constantly, and everything feels very overwhelming. And I just don't have the productivity, I don't have the desire to get stuff done. And going for a walk on the beach under the sun just really helped make me want to do something and rejuvenate me so that I could get through finals.
Well, it is really a non-negotiable that we make time for rest and replenishment and recovery. I don't know if you've ever heard that saying, like we need to make time for wellness now so that we don't need to make time for illness later.
I've not, but I love that because it's so true. When we wait, someone once said to me, would you rather take 3 hours now and just go for a walk and rest, or 3 days later in the week because you completely burnt out? And
Mhm.
that really stuck with me.
And 3 hours, I mean, even 30 minutes can make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about stress and burnout a little bit, but before we dive too deep into that, can you give a quick definition on what stress, chronic stress, and burnout is?
Sure. So stress, we use the term stress loosely, and it's used in a lot of different contexts. The context that I would consider it is, a stressor is an incoming stimuli that our nervous system or our stress response system is going to respond in the face of. So a stressor is anything that captures our attention, and then our mind and body decide quickly, do we fight, flight, or flee, or what is the response in facing this potential threat or incoming stressor. So I always think of there's healthy stress and distress and functional stress, and the stress response system is functional. It keeps us safe, it keeps us on alert for potential dangers. Part of the challenges is that we as humans have consciousness, and we can look back and ruminate, and we can look ahead and worry. And so what we often do is over activate the nervous system or unnecessarily generate distress for ourselves. So there's healthy stress, which I think is enough to keep us engaged and activated and energized, and having mild stressors, even in terms of adversity, is healthy. That helps us build resilience. It helps us become anti-fragile. And then distress, we can have acute stressors, which are, something that comes on strong, or we can have ongoing low-grade chronic stressors that can contribute to wear and tear of the system. So, couple of problems we have, number one, like I said, we over We over trigger our nervous system, and most of us don't have proper rest and recovery to get back to what we would call homeostasis.
Thank you for the way you explained it and breaking it down. I don't think people, at least I didn't for a long time, understand that some stressors can be healthy and functional and they can be really great. And then there's some that maybe like those acute stressors, they're coming up every once in a while and maybe they're impacting us. And then those chronic stressors that really can lead to that feeling of burnout when you're not able to recognize, manage, and cope with them.
Yes, and sometimes we have control over how we respond, or all the time, actually, we have control over how we respond. Um, but the language that we use matters, and what we call our stress matters too. So, what I tell my system about the stressor is relevant. So, if I tell myself I'm panicking right now, then I'm informing my nervous system to incite panic and deliver that response. If I tell myself, I'm just a little bit nervous for this upcoming exam, then that's going to lead to a different message and a different response pattern.
Yes, that is so true. My friends and I yesterday, I'm the panic one. I'm like, the world's gonna end and I'm gonna fail. And my friends are like, no, we're just a little nervous and we're gonna get through this. The world's gonna keep turning after this exam. So listening to the different ways we approached it, I approached it from a place of fear where my hands were shaking, and they approached it from a place of, "It's okay, I'm nervous, but I'm gonna get through it," and their handwriting was a lot neater and cleaner than mine. They were not rushing through really fast, just trying to get out of the room. So the way that you approach it and the wording you use really does, looking back at it, matter and make a difference in how your body's just physically responding as well as what's going on in your head.
Yeah, that's a great example. And the physiological response is real,
Yeah,
whether it's our hands are shaking or we get flushed or we get shortness of breath or all kinds of symptoms can occur, and that's real. Those symptoms are real.
they are real. And I didn't notice how noticeable they are. My teacher afterwards, when I handed in the exam, he was like, "You did great in this class." And I was like, "Thank goodness you think that because I thought I was failing." And he goes, "I really believe that." It's like, "You're shaking."
Oh,
And so it can be very noticeable when these um, kind of like physical symptoms are showing. But I think a lot of times when we don't see them and we don't see them in other people, it can make it really difficult to think, oh, it's all in our head, we're making it up.
yes, and the feedback from your professor is important information for you as you recalibrate and look at, oh, here is a data point and evidence showing me and reinforcing that I was doing well in the job in the class, so that in future situations maybe I can hit pause and right-sized my interpretation. It's like your professor offered a reframe for you.
He really did. I wish that. I hope one day I get to that point where I'm not so panicked, but it's like this constant point of, I guess, stressor in my head that the world is gonna end if I'm not perfect, and what happens if I mess up and suddenly I'm not perfect? I've expected it for so long, eventually you're gonna fail. And I put those ruminating thoughts into my head constantly and without taking time to really process them, to figure out where they're coming from, to cope with them. I am living in a state of kinda like that fight or flight, and I am just trying to get through. And I think it's really important that we take that time to recognize those ruminating thoughts that we're putting in our heads and how they're impacting our brains, our productivity, our output.
Well, and I think when we think of like we have agency over some of this, there is hope that these skills are developable. We can't necessarily prevent the intrusive thoughts from showing up. So, whatever thinking trap or cognitive distortion that we prefer, because we all do it, we all are triggered by different things. And, get engaged in catastrophic thinking or all or nothing thinking, which is maladaptive and generally not right-sized or proportionate to what the situation is. So we can't help it when the thoughts show up, yet we can practice what thoughts and thinking patterns can we introduce instead and practice that. And over time, that will help. This is what neuroplasticity is. If we practice different messaging and different patterns of response, eventually we can lean into that as our default mode of response rather than the catastrophic thinking using up so much mental real estate.
Absolutely. Cognitive distortions are really part of the human experience, and it's so easy to think because it's in our head that it's all in our head and we're the only ones who feel this way, and it can be really hard to know to recognize that these are cognitive distortions that we do have agency over and we can start changing them. But do you have any examples of maybe some common cognitive distortions people have and examples of reframing them?
Sure, I only hear them every day, all day. So yes, I have them in my own head, and then I hear about them from my clients. Well, I think you brought up one of the most important points, which is the very common sentiment that when people have anxiety or depression or panicky thoughts or whatnot, it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking I'm the only one with this struggle. And why is it so easy for so and so? Or how come this is so hard for me? So having these conversations to normalize it, because like I said, I hear this from people all day, every day, and I work with high achieving professional, high functioning humans. So it is a universal experience. We don't see that because we tend to compare our internal state with other people's external state or highlight reels. And so it's so imbalanced. The assumptions that we make based on the behaviors that we're seeing. But trust me, everybody has these struggles. Everybody struggles with self-doubt. Everybody has an inner critic voice to varying degrees. So what are the common distortions? I would say the most common cognitive distortions come from some version of not enough-ism. So I didn't get enough done today. I'm not productive enough this week. I haven't gotten far enough in my career. I haven't fill in the blank, like some version of I'm falling short of a metric, which, by the way, the next thing I will usually ask people is according to who and according to what? I haven't gotten enough done. Okay, according to what is the metric? Because usually it is a fleeting phantom expectation that is completely arbitrary. And generally that goalpost just keeps moving anyway. So the practice is challenging our assumptions. What do we know to be true? What is real? If it is in fact that my manager wants me to get A, B, and C done by 5 o'clock, okay, that's real. That's a deadline. Usually what's generating those thoughts though is static and noise about what we assume we should or shouldn't be doing based on, again, a mental model, a core belief, a phantom expectation, and that leaves people feeling less than.
Absolutely. And those enoughisms. It's so true. We put this idea in our head of what we want our day to look like or our life to look like. And we tell ourselves constantly, at least I do, I tell myself constantly that, why didn't I do more? I should have done more. One thing I do all the time that probably annoys my dad so much because he gets the phone call. I'm like, I'm not far enough along in my career and in my life and where I should be. And he's always like that question, like you said, according to who? He's like, what are you measuring against?
Mhm.
And for me, I'm measuring against this expectation that I should be where he is. And realistically, I'm 25 and he's in his 50s and has had a lot of time and opportunity to learn from life and start making different choices and getting further along in his career versus me who's just starting out. And he's always talking to me about like that highlight reel, looking at his life from, wow, I want to be there and expecting myself to be like that today while I'm still in school and not even at that point in life where I get to really start focusing on that career and those goals. Kind of there, but not really yet. And it's so hard when we tell ourselves we're not doing enough, we should be further along, and putting ourselves in these impossible situations of what we should be.
Mhm. Yeah, so a couple thoughts. I mean, you've probably heard if you compare, you will despair.
I've
Like
not,
that
but I love that.
there's no end to that. There always is going to be somebody that's further along or more successful or smarter or whatever, fill in the blank, which isn't helpful. And there's always going to be people who aren't as far along. And that's not really helpful either. So I think if we look to others, there's enough awesomeness to go around. And if you look to somebody that you aspire to follow a similar path, then we can use that as inspiration and information. But if we use it to generate despair and distress, it's not helpful.
Yeah, and that's all about how we're looking at it.
How we're looking at it. Yeah, we see things as we are, not as they are. So a flip to that is just the practice of, well, what have I done? What progress have I made? And if there are things I haven't gotten done this week that I would like to, let me pick 3.
I love the reframe on it because it is really about asking yourself where what you can do today, what you can realistically do today based on your schedule, your based on what you have in front of you, your ability to get done today. And when we're putting so much of, I guess, the expectation of the future into today, it is really, really difficult. And we're framing it for ourselves as we're not good enough, we're not far enough along when if we just looked at where we are today and how we can find 3 things, like you said, that we can do, really gives us a chance to not compare ourselves to this unrealistic standard, but motivate us to get closer to that goal that we have.
Yeah, and to have reasonable expectations. I mean, we're generally terrible predictors of how much we can get done in a given period of time. And so we don't necessarily set ourselves up for success there. So, for example, if somebody says, I'm going to work out 5 times this week, if they haven't been exercising, my challenge to that is just 1 time. Just do a 10-minute workout, just one. Because otherwise, to go from 0 to 5 is really expecting a lot of oneself. And if we're so easy, then you'd already be doing it.
Yeah, and then it's like that expectation, at least for me, the expectation that I didn't reach it, and then I'm criticizing myself again. I'm stuck in a why didn't I do that? I should be better.
Yeah.
I should be able to make the time to work out 5 times a week and suddenly have the stamina and strength. I personally don't, and I always convince myself that I'm going to be able to. And then it's like this feeling of failure and lack of motivation toward trying again.
Right. Feeling disappointed, that can be depleting.
Yeah.
But incremental steps, small continuous progress over time really does have incremental impact in so many areas of our lives. It's really important for us all to remember that, to have that reminder.
Yes, small steps. We try to put so much on our plate at once, and if we took it step by step, moment by moment, it really helps us find that space to get through instead of getting to that point where we put all this chronic stressors on ourselves and we put ourselves into this distress so we burn out.
Something you mentioned a couple minutes ago too is the why question. People can get very stuck on the why questions, and the why questions can also generate unnecessary distress. And very often there aren't sufficient answers to the why questions.
Yeah.
Why haven't I been promoted yet? Why didn't I work out this morning? Why didn't I get more stuff done? There isn't really a sufficient answer to that. And we can really keep ourselves stuck trying to focus on that. Like, I don't know, maybe I didn't work out this morning. Maybe I was just tired. So the question then is, what can I do differently tomorrow? Instead of beating myself with the stick of why I didn't do this thing that I think I should have done according to some pretend expectation.
Oh, I love that reframe. Your reframes are so great because it's taking something that we're so, I guess, programmed. I mean, you talked about the highlight reel before. We're so, at least I would say a lot of my generation, programmed to be on our phones 24/7 on social media, comparing ourselves and asking why we aren't there. Why don't we look like that? Why does our life not look like that? And when you get offline, get off that why and start looking to what's one small thing I can do toward that goal? What's one small thing I can do differently tomorrow? Giving us that step forward instead of being in that endless scroll of why am I not this?
Yeah. Well, and I am certainly not anti-tech. There are a lot of wonderful things that come from technology. However, social media has been very detrimental to mental health, particularly females in Gen Z. And you're probably aware of that. But the comparison effect and the increase of despair and depression and suicide and addiction and all of these things um, are pretty highly correlated with the introduction of social media and smartphones. And there's a lot of research on that. And it's bigger than us. All of these systems are designed to kind of hack our brains. So it's beyond us being able to just willpower ourselves out of it.
Yeah, it really is. And there's so much good that can come from being social media in terms of connection and getting your messaging out there. But I've noticed for me paying attention to how I'm feeling when I'm receiving messages. So maybe I'm putting out messages and I feel really good and confident about that, but the messages I'm receiving, how are they impacting me and starting to reframe on do I need to be following these accounts? Do these accounts make me feel inspired when I see them? Is there a purpose other than kind of depleting my energy and making me question my own self-worth? And if I'm noticing that it's those enough-isms, it's those whys, I can unfollow, or if I don't wanna unfollow, mute the account so it's not coming up on my feed all the time.
I mean, that's a very practical thing to focus on.
Those small
Is
steps.
is to take inventory and manage the inputs and manage the information that you're exposing yourself to.
Yes, because although we don't have complete control over it, there are small things we can do. Small moments of decisions we can make to better our mental health, to pay attention, to I mean, I can burn myself out just scrolling on social media, comparing myself nonstop every day. And for a long time, I did that. And eventually calling my dad crying every day on why don't I look a certain way and why doesn't my life look a certain way? He was like, start unfollowing those accounts. Stop sitting there and stressing yourself out to a point where you're crying and unproductive for 3 days because you're just stuck in this state of what's wrong with me. And I think that was a huge message I needed to hear, that I don't need to be stuck in this "what's wrong with me?" I can have those thoughts because that's completely normal, but then what can I do to make myself feel like I'm moving toward that life that I want? What can I do to make myself feel empowered and motivated by those things that I want, that I aspire toward?
Well, that's a great example of having agency over your mental health and well-being, and being able to look at what what are energy fillers, what are energy drainers, what do I which parts of these do I have control over? Some you may not. Some energy drainers we don't have control over, but many we do.
Yeah, we absolutely do. What are some examples of more energy drainers that we do have control over?
Well, anything that's non-negotiable. So, energy drainers could be activities, they could be commitments, duties, obligations, they could be relationships. Some relationships are draining, some relationships aren't as negotiable, um, but many are. And we can decide, how the situations that we're putting ourselves in and how we can set up boundaries.
Yes, boundaries are completely okay. For so long, I assumed a boundary was me being selfish. that if I'm saying no to someone, that I'm saying I don't have the capacity right now, that I'm prioritizing myself over someone else, and that was bad. And when that messaging started to change in my brain and the information I was exposed to, I learned that it's okay to say, "No, I don't have the capacity," or "I can get this to you later." It's unrealistic for me to record a podcast, go through the whole editing process, and have it to you within an hour, but I may be able to get it to you within a week or 2 weeks. So learning that it doesn't have to be this extreme demand, and if someone is putting that demand on us that is not realistic, it's okay to say, "It's not realistic, and I will absolutely work on this and get it for you to you by when you really need it. It's just not going to be immediate." And learning to just say, "No," in a respectful, healthy way that does not cause you to lose your job is something I've learned too.
Well, yes, it's the middle path. The middle path. It isn't about avoiding responsibility. It isn't about saying, I don't do that. I don't want to do this because I don't feel like it. But being able to say no and manage your own self and manage your own feelings and manage your own well-being is our job because nobody else will do it for us. So if you can learn that as you are early in life, that self-care isn't selfish, it's a responsibility, your life will be so much better.
Absolutely. It's all about finding ways to support yourself within your life. There are some things, like you said, that are non-negotiable, the non-negotiables that we can't change,
Mhm.
and that's okay as long as we make time to care for ourselves through it. We don't have to sit through it and put it all on ourselves and just accept the way it makes us feel. We can do small things to help us get through it, like going for a walk or just sitting outside and letting that sunshine, hopefully in a position where there is some sunshine. Love that about Florida and LA.
Mhm.
And being able to maybe read a book, journal, have a cup of tea before bed. Small things that you can do to not feel just stuck in this emotion, but connect to yourself.
Well, and reinforcing the idea that, my feelings are my job and your feelings are your job and other people's feelings are their job. I think what gets in the way of people setting boundaries is we get concerned that we don't want to hurt their feelings or we want their approval or we don't want them to not like us. We don't want to disappoint them. Yet
Mhm.
that comes at a cost.
Yeah, absolutely. And learning that, like you said, our emotions matter and we can't, it's so easy to be stuck in this idea that I have to please everyone all the time. I have to do everything for everyone and make everyone else happy, and that'll give me self-worth. At least that's how I was for a long time, working through that. And being able to recognize I matter too, and it's okay to put myself first. Sometimes. Doesn't have to be every single time because that's sometimes a little unrealistic to expect to go from I prioritize everyone else to I'm prioritizing myself 24/7. But being able to find spaces where you can set those boundaries that allow you to say, I need to prioritize myself right now. I need to be able to get through where I'm at so that I can continue to be productive and show up in the way that I hope to.
That's powerful.
It's something that I've been starting to learn. I spend a lot of time arranging my life and my schedule around taking care of other people or being where I'm supposed to be. And I realized how much that was draining me. And whenever it would catch up to me, which is usually once a week, it was a Sunday night, 8 p.m., I would just break down. I had it
Mhm.
on a schedule. And I noticed constantly, and I was just so overwhelmed, and everything felt like too much. And I didn't have to feel that way all the time. In the beginning, I was like, "Well, it's 8 o'clock on a Sunday, that's just gonna happen. I can't go out to dinner with my friends because I'm going to fall apart." And realizing I could say no to some things.
Mhm.
Some things I couldn't say no to. I still had to be in class for 6 hours
Mhm.
on a Tuesday night. Couldn't
Mhm.
change that. But how could I make myself feel a little excited for it and maybe changing from I have to be there to I get to learn about this new topic based on whatever the syllabus that I was learning. Being able to change it to I don't have to be the only caretaker today. I can ask someone to help me out and say, "Tag, you're it. It's your turn. I need to take some time to be able to go for a walk for a couple hours and or I need to take time to get my homework done and not have to do it in the middle of the night." Learning that I could say, "I need space." I could reframe it. I didn't have to be stuck in that I need to do everything for everyone else to the point where it's costing me my mental health.
Mhm. Well, and I think once you practice that, and hopefully you're learning it, that when you do ask for help or set a boundary or say, can't do that now, but thanks for asking, most of the time it's just fine with the other person. We can get in our heads about they're going to be mad or this isn't going to work. I don't want to bother them. But most of the time it's just fine. And isn't that what we would tell a friend to do?
Yes, exactly. We really build it up in our heads that the world's gonna end, but if our friends asked us for support or our loved ones asked us for support or told us, "I don't have the capacity today," or "Can you please help me with this?" It's we would want to support them because we love them, and to reframe it to what would I tell a friend, how would I respond to a friend, really helps you see that it's not gonna be the end of the world, and if someone reacts poorly, because it's bound to happen eventually, knowing that that's not your fault. That is a reflection of their emotions and what they feel and aren't expressing in the greatest way for you guys to communicate on what the best option is on how you can support each other and each other's needs.
Well, and asking for help is a trust deposit in a relationship generally. But yes, regardless, however other people respond, that's because they're them. That's not because we're us.
Yes, absolutely. And it's so important to recognize just because someone doesn't respond in the right way doesn't mean you don't deserve to ask for help again. And maybe you can't get it from that one person, but you still deserve help. And hopefully you can find someone who's willing to give you that help because you deserve it and you don't have to go through all of this alone.
Sounds very healthy. Nicely done.
Thank you. I'm learning
Yes.
slowly.
Aren't we all learning slowly?
It's so important that we give ourselves grace to learn too, right? I think for me, for so long, I was like, well, this is just how it is. I didn't give myself the space to learn and messed up and realized I tried to set a boundary and did not enforce it. And it didn't mean that I was never going to be able to. I just had to practice. Or I thought, I didn't make time for self-care. I clearly don't care about myself and then refused to do it for a while to try. And then I got to a point where I said, I do care about myself. Maybe it's not easy and realistic to try to add 10 different practices into my day to manage my self-care, but what's one thing I can do tomorrow, whether it's just 30 seconds of breathing or it's going for that walk or having that cup of tea before bed? What can I do instead of going back to that? I'm not enough. Why am I like this? Really changed a lot for me, slowly learning through it.
Well, we all do this funny thing, which is self-sabotaging and engage in self-defeating behaviors. It's just part of being human. So we all do it. I think what we need to hope for is that when we get off track, we just get back to center more quickly. And that over time, maybe we get off course a little less often, a little less frequently, or a little less intensely, and that we get back on more quickly. I mean, I think that's what we have to hope for because we're not going to get it right every time.
Yes, we're not going to get it right every time. Getting back on the horse is so, so important. As we are wrapping up, what is one piece of advice you could give to someone who's listening, who's maybe thinking, I want to take that step toward supporting myself? I am struggling to set a boundary or knowing where to start.
I think taking stock of commitments in life and just general energy outputs and looking at what am I doing in my life to fill my bucket, whether that's through work or leisure time. what things in my life are draining my energy or causing distress, and of all of that, which are negotiable. Where can I engage in more life promoting or well-being promoting activities and reduce the life draining activities? And really, I think most of us need to be smarter about watching when the tank is getting empty and not waiting for it to be all the way empty when we're having a meltdown, but to try and get some preventative interventions or actions in place. So, I mean, I think of the elements of flourishing are focusing on your well-being, connecting with people, and having a strong sense of purpose, meaning getting outside yourself. So that would be my suggestion, is to look at those areas.
Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.